On April 4th, 2025, Frank Eckert, the CEO of Magnosphere in Troisdorf, Germany, wakes up to some very bad news. China has completely frozen its exports of dysprosium, and with the small stock they have left, their production will soon freeze along with it. Now, your first question would logically be, why should I care if some random company in Germany can't get a metal that sounds like some ancient Greek god? And that is indeed a very good question, because you should care a lot. Like a lot, like a lot. You see, Magnosphere uses dysprosium to build permanent magnets. Magnets which are then used to build small electric actuators and motors, which are then used to build wind turbines, electric cars, industrial assembly robots, medical MRI scanners, the speakers you use to listen to your music, the electric toothbrush you use to brush your teeth. You see where I'm going with this, right? If Magnosphere doesn't have dysprosium, it's not going to be able to make good magnets. And without those, the consequences are going to be devastating. So, what is dysprosium? Dy on the periodic table is a rare earth metal that humans were only able to isolate in 1906. The scientists that first discovered it literally named it after the Greek dys for bad, difficult, and positus, which means approachable. So it's very difficult to approach, inaccessible. And it has stayed true to this name until basically today, with the only economically viable mines being located in China. So, only a few weeks after the start of the new export freeze by China, Eckert is getting calls day and night from his buyers at Mercedes and BMW who are willing to pay absolutely any price for any stock he has left. In the end, several automakers around the world, including Suzuki and Ford, had to stop some of their assembly lines for weeks, losing billions of dollars in earnings in the process. But wait, there is more. Because Xi Jinping, of course, doesn't do these things at random. He does them with specific aims in mind. In this case, the freeze resulted from new export controls as an answer to Trump's tariff extravaganza on April 2nd. Now, any company that wants to export rare earths from China has to get a special license. And since it took weeks to get those licenses, these new measures resulted in the export freeze that sent shockwaves through the world economy. The US Department of Energy itself recently re-emphasized dysprosium's criticality in its critical materials assessment for energy security and clean energy goals. The fact that this time around, wrecking automakers around the world wasn't even their true intention, and it cost billions of dollars anyways, shows how incredibly powerful their complete control over the production of these key rare earth minerals truly is as a weapon to be used in the geopolitical battles of our time. And barely anybody knows about this. Well, maybe except for the Japanese, because they got to feel this already firsthand in 2010 after detaining a Chinese fishing boat captain that had actively rammed Japanese Coast Guard boats after being asked to leave Japanese territorial waters around the Senkaku Islands. It only took 2 months of unofficial rare earth export stop until the Japanese government was pressured by its own industry into giving up and releasing the captain without any further demands or an apology. Now, this is a channel about regeneration, and I absolutely agree that a lot of the high-tech, super complex gadgetry of our modern-day world simply is not needed. I love myself a good low-tech project, like the vermicomposting I talked about a few years ago. But I also really like the internet and freely available electricity. And for now, that means wind turbines and solar panels, which are reliant on yttrium, which is also 97% sourced from China. And here we get to the crux of what anybody outside of China will be facing the next few decades. Because we can build a lot of these technologies without rare earth metals. For example, we can build permanent magnets without dysprosium. It just means that their heat resistance and durability decreases to the point where they can't be used in any even slightly hot environment, aka any mid-sized electric motor. On the other hand, we can also build wind turbines with a gearbox to increase the rotation speeds of a weak externally powered electromagnet inside the generator to a point where electricity generation becomes possible. But this will always be a worse solution than what we can build with rare earth materials, where we have a permanent, much more powerful magnet that enables electricity generation at much lower rotation speeds, without the need for a noisy gearbox that lowers efficiency and without the need for an external power supply, which is especially useful in offshore projects. Any product produced without these advanced tricks brought by the material science revolution does not stand a chance in an open competitive market. If we don't want to make all our clean tech production dependent on China, it would require massive tariffs on objectively superior products in order to protect local companies, perhaps indefinitely. I would argue that that is exactly what's happening in the electric car sector right now, where the EU is imposing tariffs from 17% on BYD up to 35% on SAIC cars, on top of their 10% flat tariffs. And US measures are even higher to protect their car companies until they can produce at a similar price, if that ever happens. China currently produces 70 to 80% of all rare earth metals, and it doesn't seem like that will change significantly anytime soon. If we want to make human civilization cleaner with a lower impact on our environment, we need these technologies, and that means we need dysprosium, samarium, yttrium, and their other fun-sounding friends. Xi Jinping has long realized the power he holds with this, but more importantly, now he is more and more willing to use it. This time around, 2 months after the export freeze, by the end of June, China reached trade deals with the US and Europe that have more or less normalized exports again. In general, it doesn't seem like China plans to ever completely ban rare earth exports. For now, it keeps the world dependent on its supply, while using its export controls to impact what their materials are used for. The most genius impact of these controls is, however, the resulting price differential. A kilogram of dysprosium sells for $400 to $700 depending on purity and form within China, and for $1,000 to $1,200 outside of China. That's 2 to 3 times as much. This means companies worldwide are incentivized to move their production, and with that, a lot of jobs and information on their production techniques to China. A huge economic boon for them. Governments, universities, and companies worldwide are researching alternatives to the current rare earth-based technological solutions. But for now, balance will continue to depend on the rest of the world producing things that China wants just as bad as the rest of the world wants rare earth metals. I hope you enjoyed this video. With such few people knowing about how deep this issue goes, I'd be very interested of what you think of rare earth metals. Should we just abandon rare earth tech as quickly as possible, or attack China militarily and secure supply that way? Something in between? I'd be very curious to hear your ideas in the comments. Let's regenerate Earth.